common narrative surrounding rest periods and muscle growth in the evidence-based community has been more is better. A hallmark study by Schoenfeld and colleagues is commonly cited to support this point, demonstrating superior muscle growth with 3 versus 1 minutes of interset rest. However, a recent preprint meta-analysis by Singer and colleagues challenges this narrative, suggesting that short rest periods are sufficient to optimize muscle growth. This meta-analysis compared the available data in a few different ways. I'm going to focus on the model that got the most press across social media, and the other analyses generally align with this. In the model I'm referring to, the authors separated rest into 4 categories: short, intermediate, long, and very long. Overall, the model suggested no major differences between rest periods, and if you take the results at face value, rest periods of 60 to 120 seconds might be your best bet. With some of the other analyses, the authors suggested that rest periods less than or equal to 60 seconds may be a bit too short to optimize growth, particularly in the lower body, but the differences weren't particularly large nor precise. So to sum up the results, as long as you're resting at least 60 seconds, it's probably sufficient to maximize muscle growth. That said, despite these results, I remain pretty unconvinced of the rest period literature at large. First and foremost, there are only 5 studies that use direct measures of muscle size. These are local measurements of muscle like ultrasound, MRI, and these are less influenced by noise such as hydration status than something like DEXA scans. The authors did some secondary analyses that somewhat looked at these studies in isolation, but omitted 2 studies by Souza Jr. and colleagues. I believe this was done because the shorter rest group in these studies progressively decreased their rest intervals over the course of the training intervention. But I think looking at how these studies impact the pooled effect size could be important. Below, I've reanalyzed the studies with direct measures of muscle size with and without the studies by Souza Jr. et al. When including all of the studies with direct measures of muscle size, the effect straddled 0 and had poor precision. Upon removing the Souza Jr. studies, the directionality of the point estimate flips, and only 3 studies remain in the analysis. Conceptually, I think this demonstrates the uncertainty in this area, and that there just isn't a ton of data to go off of. Considering that the best studies do tend to favor longer rest periods, I wouldn't go out of my way to meaningfully cut my rest unnecessarily. Moreover, there are other aspects of individual studies that are worth noting, such as potentially uncontrolled proximities to failure, and some of these details are really nicely laid out in an Instagram post by Daniel Plotkin. All of this said, if you're looking to A, make your training sessions more time efficient, or B, trying to pack in more sets in a fixed training time, the potential downsides might be worth it. One could also appeal to the intensity technique research, which seems to show similar growth using things like drop sets that use even shorter rest intervals than what was in this analysis. However, it's still unclear if an extra set or 2 is necessary to equate outcomes to longer rest intervals, which potentially hints at the theoretical downside. The point here is there's just a lot we don't know. Personally, if I was to hedge my bets, I think there's probably something to be gained from longer rest periods, but the difference may very well be overshadowed by the logistical upsides that shorter rest periods provide. Below is fitting the available data in the way that makes the most sense to me, treating rest duration as a continuous variable. This would suggest notable improvements in muscle size as you go from very short to moderate rest periods, but strongly diminishing returns thereafter. This comports well with what the authors reported, but notice the absolutely massive uncertainty intervals and very little amount of data. I think this is just one we have to be really cautious with our opinions at this stage and maybe a bit too early to form strong conclusions. From a practical perspective, I prescribe rest intervals using the following 3-step process. First, I start with the principle that resting as long as necessary to maintain performance is probably the safest bet to make sure we're checking off every box to maximize the return on investment per set for muscle growth. In my experience, for multi-joint lifts, it's going to be somewhere in the range of 3 to 5 minutes, and for other lifts, 1 to 3 minutes. After that, I ask myself, does this exercise or this session have time constraints? If yes, I usually decrease that range of recommended rest periods by about 1 minute. So somewhere in the range of 2 to 4 minutes for multi-joint lifts and somewhere in the range of 0 to 2 minutes for other lifts. That's where you can use things like drop sets, myo reps, what have you. Finally, to really fine-tune things, I'll auto-regulate further based on the training prescription. So if I'm training closer to failure with higher repetitions and potentially lower body lifts, I'll probably rest a little bit longer relative to those ranges. And the opposite is true for training farther from failure with lower reps in upper body lifts like bicep curls. You can rest a little bit shorter in those cases. Deciding how long to rest is a foundational component of program design. It may have independent influences on training outcomes, but probably more importantly, it impacts our training time and efficiency. While this meta-analysis is extremely well done and a great first step, I do believe the underlying data are limited, and thus we should be cautious in our interpretations. While I do think this analysis supports that there's no massive difference between rest periods, I still think there may be some theoretical upside to longer rest periods that are worth considering in your decision-making process. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, and let us know what you want to see from us next in the comments below. And if you want more free content like this directly in your inbox, sign up for our newsletter, which is the first link below.